Kim, and thank you, Sapna, as well, for coming and talking about your work and what you do. I think that now I'd like just to have a general discussion to hear people's thoughts on what they've heard. I think we can maybe have a question and answer session. I don't know if there are things you'd like to ask more to any of us, so we're open for questions. Alright, I'm going to start with a question then. I have an interesting question. If you read the book, you'll find it's mostly men telling their stories, it's mostly the boys and the young men are the protagonists, they're the ones with the guns. But in fact, you know, the gender roles and the gender relationships within the favelas have a lot to do with what goes on. One of the main reasons that the boys get into the traffic is to get girls, because that gives them status within the communities. I was wondering, are you working with girls? What sort of outreach do you do with girls, and how do gender relations affect teenagers here, and also the links to violence and so on? Is that maybe it's about 5 questions in one.
We actually, in our office, have been posing that same question, and we spin it out to the girls. If it didn't look so sexy, would they be doing it? You know, part of what makes the guys want to have the car and have the jewelry and have sort of that money to be able to buy anything is to impress who? The young women. And so we talk to the young women. You know, oftentimes you look at the issues around youth violence, there's so much focus on the men, the young men as victims, young men as perpetrators, and not looking at the other 50%, which is what is the role for young women. And even if they may not be the perpetrators, how are they, almost in a secondary way, encouraging that culture to continue?
Well, probably in our work, we probably wouldn't relate as much to women, but the work that we're doing is mostly geared to first-generation Americans and immigrants, and then so the World Percussion Ensemble is the class that runs through the high school. Then that's what brings them, you know, awareness of diversity, and we play rhythms from different parts of the world, so they can celebrate and accept other cultures, and also that has shown to smooth out their transition on learning English and getting adapted to the American educational system.
And I would say that we really try to have conversations with our youth, because even though we are a music organization, we're half a music organization and half a teen youth center. So our staff all, we really function like a family. So our staff really try to have conversations with our young women, particularly when they're going through adolescence and times of puberty, when they're trying to get more attention from boys and acting out in different ways, that about how behavior is contributing to a larger domino effect, and how it's oftentimes being categorized as a group of youth, how everybody's personal actions contribute to the larger picture. So.
Yes.
My colleague and I here are from UMass Boston, and we're doing a Breaking the Cycle of Violence, a dialogue with program providers and youth and a whole host of our students and the like. And we brought in about 85 youth between the ages of about 15 to 20, some from DYS, some with Teen Power, or Peace Fellows. So there was a real mix of them. And we asked them, where do they see violence in their community? And a large number of people were seeing it in their homes, in their personal relationships, and then in school, right? And these are folks that some claim to be gang members, probably are, and then they talked about their own violence that they had perpetrated. So when we talk about violence, and we talk about a culture of violence that exists, they just held and they overall, when we asked them what we thought we should do about it, they said, really, there's not much you can do. This is just normal. There will always be violence. And so just kind of a sense of hopelessness that was out there. So I guess, what is your experience with that?
Well, I can speak to that. I think we really try to create a safe space, is a big word that we use and that gets thrown around, but as a place to model behavior from the staff and the young people that is nonviolent and that addresses other ways of being, even if behavior is ingrained in a certain way, if it's normal. But I think one of the things that really works about the way that ZooMix has always run is that even though we're working with at-risk youth, we consider every youth to be at risk. And we also, if you look at our mission statement, it's not to empower youth, it's empowered youth. And so we never say things like, we never highlight the fact that people come from violent families or violent backgrounds. We highlight the goodness that they have already inside of themselves and where their power already lies, and convince them that it's there. And they don't often need to be convinced sometimes. They know that it's there, and just help give them an avenue to discovering it and growing it on their own. And so I think the ways that we as adults can often contextualize the young people that we work with ends up having a negative effect sometimes if we say to them, like, this is the context that you're coming from. This is, instead of saying this is what exists inside of you that is good and that we can grow.
That sense of hopelessness is where, when I confront that in some of the work that I do, those are the days where I go home and just lay down, to be quite honest, and I wonder, why did I even try to get into this field? Because it is so unbreakable and unpenetrable, it seems. And it is true that it is hopeless for some of them, or it'll never change in that neighborhood. And I think that's what I say back when I'm confronted with that. And I say that now. I didn't say that years ago. I was really, I take it very personally, because it's very painful to know that for some young people, for some communities, this is their day-to-day. But it's that way for them. It's not that way for me. And why is that? So I push it back to that. Why is that in this neighborhood you do have to walk with your hood up and your head down, and you have to be on guard, literally on guard? And in my neighborhood, I don't have to do that at all. I don't even think about that. Why is that? Why should it be like that? Why does it have to be like that? And when I start posing those questions back to young people, that's when they either just shrug their shoulders or sort of sit back, because not a lot of people ask them that. Well, why is it like that? Have you thought about why, when you go to a different neighborhood, it doesn't feel like that? And helping them understand the bigger context within which they are. And it is true, for some of them, they do have to respond in a particular way. When somebody approaches them, they do have to respond in a particular way for their own safety. That doesn't excuse it. That doesn't make it right. That's acknowledging that may be true for you in this moment. It's not true for me. It's not true for you when you go to other places. Mm-hmm. So that's one piece of it. The other is just the toll that takes, that constant level of being on guard. I heard something recently about sort of the PTSD, or just that living in that trauma, and living in that heightened sense of awareness. And I think you talk about that in your book as well, Damian, that you can't turn it off. And so oftentimes on the news, if you're not in this work or aware of it, people wonder, how did a 15-year-old kill another one over a pair of sneakers? It was never about the pair of sneakers. It's just that constant sense of always that pressure of feeling like, how dare you disrespect me? And where is that even coming from? And so it just, always being on guard, always sort of watching your back, means you have to respond within a millisecond if you're going to be safe. And they have seen the consequences of that. And so they don't know, if you're raised like that, if you're always in that environment, you don't know how to turn that off. And to be able to work to turn that off is a lot of work. And again, that's the work that we try to do. That's what we push to look at. Looking at community centers, youth programs, what's available for young people, how can there be more, why isn't there?